down to business.
When he drinks, he thinks.
That's the nectar of the gods, baby.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the number one liquid-fueled, liquid lubricated show on the interwebs. This is the Whiskey Musings Broadcast, and I am your whiskey-drinking, truth-telling, and maybe a little bit later, happy birthday singing host, Rick. Happy birthday to Music Man over on Rumble. He went ahead and let us know that he was born on this day many, many years ago. And of course, everybody over on Rumble is sitting there saying things like, oh, you're just a youngster, I did this, or oh my gosh, you know, you've seen so much, etc., etc. All right, so I have some things for you tonight. The first thing that I'm going to say, though, is they went and changed or did an addition on the social network to where I can grab the chats. And unfortunately, I didn't realize that they had changed it and did something different. So some things may not work. I'm not going to guarantee that I'll be able to pop things up in the corner up here when I get to that point. Also, I do want to point out that I have asked a few others to the broadcast, in particular, a youngster in particular, and hopefully she will pop by if she's not already, but hopefully she will pop by. She said that she would. She is a young Trump supporter, very active on Twitter that I've seen, and so hopefully she'll come by and at least breeze by, or at least say something, maybe in the chat or whatever. Also, I haven't seen Z yet. I'm looking at Z as well. I see Becky from my Australia contingent has popped in, so that's cool. That is cool. All right. Okay, so today obviously is the first day of the month of February. And tomorrow we get to find out if we have 6 more weeks of winter or not, based on Puxatawny Phil getting his shadow. But of course, with February, we kick off Black History Month. Now, I'm going to be completely honest. I don't necessarily care so much about the idea of looking at and celebrating Black history, with one big exception. And that happens to be this whole idea of identity politics and identity division in this country has really, really made it difficult to be here as an American. I mean, let's just face it, and I've said this before, I've said it on the program before, so this should come as no surprise to anyone on this who has been around for a while. But, you know, this whole idea of identifying yourself as a separate American, whether it's Italian American, whether it's Jewish American, whether it's African American, you know, we are probably, I'm going to guess, probably the only country that does this. And the reason that I say this is when you go over to England, for an example, which is another Western culture country, very similar to ours because of our similar roots. But the thing about it is when you go over there and you ask somebody who is obviously from another ethnicity other than white, and you ask them, what are you? They're going to tell you, I'm English. Same thing goes if you head off to France. France is the exact same way. If you go to France and you ask someone who is obviously not of a particular skin melanin tone, the first thing they're going to tell you is, I'm French. And you go into Canada, even Canada, I mean, I'm Canadian. So why is it that we here in America seem to want to be why we want to be in this position where we're divided by a dash. We're either American or we're something else. And that is why I get a little frustrated with the idea that we have a particular month for a particular ethnicity. I mean, we don't have an Asian History Month. We don't have a White History Month. We don't even have, believe it or not, we don't even have like a Native American History Month either. Which realistically, that honestly, if we had a Native American History Month, and maybe we do, maybe I just don't know about it, but it certainly isn't as celebrated as something like Black History Month. So why do we even need to have it? If you're an American, then your history is American history. If you are an American, regardless of what tone, what melanin tone you have in your skin, you should call yourself an American. If you were born here, you should call yourself an American. So why is it that we have to focus on the melanin color in somebody's skin? It's simple. It's identity politics. It's in order to start with the warp and the change of our language to create an identity that is separated from being American. And I bring this clip, I'm gonna bring this clip up basically only from the standpoint of this. To me, this is a great man. This is a really great man in my mind. And he was talking on 60 Minutes. And he had an interview on 60 Minutes. And it's not just 60 Minutes. He has said these things on CNN and so on and so forth. But he's been an outspoken advocate for just this particular scenario. He's also been an outspoken advocate to literally stop talking about race, to get rid of the idea that race is such a big deal in this country. So let me go ahead and bring this up. And it's a short clip. I know I don't do clips very often, but this is a very important clip. And I think it's really, really apropos. It is with Mike Wallace on 60 Minutes. So you can tell just by who's interviewing him how old this clip actually is. Take a listen.
Black History Month you find
ridiculous. Why? You're going to relegate my history to a month?
Oh, come on.
What do you do with yours? Which month is White History Month? Well, come on, tell me.
Well, I'm Jewish.
Okay, which month is Jewish History Month?
There isn't one.
Oh, why not?
Yeah.
Do you want one?
No.
I don't either. I don't want a Black History Month. Black history is American history.
All right. And I mean, I'll be completely honest with you on this. I totally agree with him. It's not a bad thing to want to celebrate certain events of history or even to condemn events of history. But the point that I'm trying to make here is that and you know, I know people are going to say, well, you're a white guy, you know, you're in that age bracket and so on and so forth. You know, you're a bigot, you're a racist. No, it has nothing to do with that. Either we're Americans or we're not. Either we are Americans or we aren't. And by Americans, one of the great things of these Americans and our values is the fact that we used to celebrate the fact that we were a melting pot, that we brought in a lot of people from other cultures and melded them into America. And we've turned that down with the idea that your identity is basically made up of either one of a couple of different things: your sexual orientation, your gender, or the skin tone that you have. All of these things realistically are things that are generally immutable. They shouldn't matter. Just like eye color doesn't matter, just like hair color doesn't matter, just like height doesn't matter. Okay? All of these things are things that people cannot control. And so why do we as a society make that into such a huge identity, a huge part of our identity? Why does it matter? And that's what I keep coming back to this every single time I see Black History Month come up. And it's not that I'm trying to like rip on it. I'm not trying to say that, hey, Black History Month is bad, we need to get rid of it. No, I'm just simply saying, what is its purpose other than to focus on a division within America and divided politics? Okay? That's all I'm saying. And I'm probably going to, I'll probably get blasted by this thing. I don't know. But that's pretty much where I stand on this. All right. I wanted to get this out there, and I have an opinion article kind of on this too. But before I do that, I need to, of course, do a couple of things. First of all, tonight I am going back to an old favorite. I am drinking Jameson Black Barrel within my glass. And that's only because, of course, I got this, again, as a Christmas gift. My Christmas had a lot of whiskey in it. So what does that tell you? Oh my gosh. Anyway, so here we are. It's in the glass. And again, it's straight or neat with 3 stones in it, a little cold. But here we go. All right. And I also want to say, where is it? Ah, goodness. Come on. That is not, here we go. It is Whiskey Wednesday, of course. It's like Taco Tuesday, but for badasses. All right. So it is Whiskey Wednesday, and in that vein, tonight, I want to talk to you about TGRN, True Grit Roots Network, champions independent artists while paying respect to the pioneers that shaped modern roots music, featuring outlaw country, blues, and rock with a unique twist of urban that is carefully selected and purposely put together. We are the radio highway that connects the back roads, highways, and city streets to your favorite dance hall, roadhouse, and juke joint. TGRN provides original exclusive programming and interviews that are produced and hosted by our own team of DJs, hosts, and personalities. Find us on the web at tgrn.net to download our app from the App Store and from Google Play. Alternatively, you can also find us on the Live 365 catalog of internet digital radio stations and through the Live 365 app as well. You can also play our station from your Amazon Alexa by saying "Play True Grit Roots Network from Live 365. Be sure to use the word "from" in the command "Play True Grit Roots Network from Live 365. Live 365 is also now on Roku as well. And TGRN, of course, announces our newest sponsor, American Badass Whiskey from Garage Oil Spirits. American Badass Whiskey is a high-octane, extra-fine blend of American whiskey made for every hardworking man and woman that proudly puts in a solid day's work every day. Check out this new award-winning Texas whiskey at garageoilspirits.com. That website, once again, is garageoilspirits.com. TrueGrit.com. Breaking boundaries for authentic roots radio, True Grit Roots Network, TGRN.net, Austin, Texas. And of course, for those of you that may not know, I am part owner in that endeavor with a very good friend of mine. We've been friends for many, many years. So anyway, now on to the rest of the show. All right. I have a couple of things that I want to talk about. One of the main things, okay, so Buddy asks, what kind of whiskey is it? It is American whiskey. So for those of you that don't know, whiskey itself, I think it's corn, but it could be something else. It could be, I don't know. I haven't gotten into the details yet. I haven't even gotten a bottle yet, although I've been promised that by my partner. Hopefully it'll come sometime this week. But as far as the whiskey is concerned, it is an American whiskey. Of course, you can't call anything out of Tennessee like Tennessee bourbon because it's not out of Tennessee. It's not actually made in Tennessee. It's made in Texas, so it can't be called Tennessee whiskey. It also can't be called Kentucky bourbon for the same reason, because it was made outside of Kentucky. So it is strictly just an American whiskey. In terms of what its base is, I don't know that. I could take a look, or I could go ahead and take a look and things like that on it. But I would definitely take a look at garageoilspirits.com and look at the history of where they came from, and that kind of thing. So it's supposed to be really, really good for it. So as far as the whiskey is concerned, and I was told, believe it or not, by the manufacturer on my Facebook page, that the way that they recommend drinking it is with ice, so a couple of ice cubes with the whiskey, and then a splash of water, because what that does is it brings out the flavors and the scent, and it's supposed to be the best way to do it. So that's, I'm kind of excited to get the bottle. I really am excited to get it. So anyway, all right. So really quickly, I do have a pet of the week this week. I have another submission for next week, so that is absolutely awesome. And we'll get to that here in just a little bit. But apparently, considering the fact that this is Black History Month, and we have a lot of talk of racism in today's news and that kind of stuff, I do have an opinion piece, and this is the first opinion piece, or the first piece for tonight. And this happens to deal with what he calls an uncomfortable historic reality, in the fact that we've actually seen what he calls woke racism before. This is a piece by Joseph D. Hippolito, and he put it out on January 30th of this year. He kind of goes through a little bit, because today, on the 30th, marks the anniversary of Adolf Hitler's appointment as Chancellor of Germany, Germany's politically chaotic Weimar Republic. So in other words, this was the start of Adolf Hitler's rise to power. And now the thing about it is that he talks a little bit about the history of the Nazis slightly, and of course their whole anti-Semitic laws and things like that end up culminating in the Holocaust. And I suggest that you read this piece. I would go and grab or go and take a look. It's in the show notes. It's the first piece in the show notes under for all of the articles, and I've got a bunch of them, believe me. But it's the first one in the show notes. But the one thing that really kicked into mind for me was dealing with the idea that we have places like Mount Sinai's Icahn School, ICAHN, I believe I'm pronouncing it correct, School of Medicine that had a statement, that put out a statement that said, there is no priority in medical education that is more important than addressing and eliminating racism and bias. And then you have the UC Berkeley's College of Engineering that asserted excellence in advancing equity and inclusion must be considered on par with excellence in research and teaching. And then you have California Community College's demand for faculty to create course content that promotes a race-conscious and intersectional lens, and to evaluate those same faculty as well as administrators and staff members based on competencies in diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. Now, the writer of the piece, again, equates these kinds of statements to the statements that came out from the Nazis, where they were talking about woke ideologues who promote diversity, equity, and inclusion, and that kind of stuff, that these people are dedicated racists. And if you think about it, I mean, again, I would read the piece, read it with an open mind, to be honest with you. But we need to understand that as far as historical, significance here, we have to take a look at the whole purposes. And if you know the left, they suffer oftentimes from what's called the soft bigotry of low expectations. They believe that people of color have a more difficult time to get simple ID. I mean, I've talked about that on this show. They believe that you have to have these government programs to help them out because literally, even though they're not saying it, they are implying the fact that people of color cannot compete with otherwise white Americans in the world and in today's day and age. And so every time, like I said, every time we come back around to this whole thing, when we're talking about, Black History Month and the division in our country, we have to understand that this is a purpose. There is a purpose behind this. And so, sorry, there was something that came up on the chat. I'm not going to say it, but the point here is that it's a forced division just in the language that is being used. And if you start to look at things through a racial lens, you start to realize that the whole thing with regards to, for an example, Martin Luther King, who said that he would much rather have his daughter judged on the content of her character rather than the way that she looked or the color of her skin. And I paraphrased there. But the point is that if we're going to be focused, if we're supposed to be focused on the content of character, we need to look beyond those immutable characteristics that are things such as skin color, eye color, hair color, religion, and start to look at people more for their actions and the way that they interact and treat others as a part of our ideologies when we are looking at these folks and looking at other people. And so, this entire idea that division and equity and inclusion and accessibility, they're basically making it sound like they can't do that on their own because of the fact that they need help in order to make this the place that it is. And again, like I said, I encourage you to read the piece, read it with an open mind, take it for what it is, face value or not. But realistically, I have a hard time. I have a very hard time dealing with people who are looking at things like immutable characteristics and using those items as a definition of a person, because I know plenty of people of all races and ethnicities and even religious backgrounds. And many of them are really good people. But the one thing that is common across all of them is they look at themselves as Americans. All right, enough about that. That literally is all I want to talk. All I'm going to talk about as far as Black History Month is concerned. Okay, so some things have been heating up throughout the world. I don't know if anybody's noticed, but Israel has been blamed for a drone attack on Iran. We've got, the whole Ukraine and sending tanks over to Ukraine, the possibility and talk of doing F-16s, and so on and so forth. Well, if you recall, several episodes ago, I think toward the middle of last year, I told you, and I said, we need to also focus on what's going on with China. In particular, China and its similarities to the Japan imperialism in the 1930s, leading up to essentially the attack on Pearl Harbor as the defined moment. So the thing about it is here, though, is that we need to keep an eye on the whole China-Taiwan thing, because I'm telling you, first of all, if you recall, when I was talking about this, Taiwan makes 90% or better, but I'm going to use 90 just because it's a nice round number, but 90% of the silicon chips that are in pretty much 90% of all electronics, even the ones coming from, say, China and Japan and Vietnam and some of those other places, the Philippines, etc. They all have some sort of chip that has come from Taiwan as a good bet. And the reason being is because Taiwan has become very effective at making those chips, making silicon chips. And they've become literally the world's supplier of all these circuit boards and chips that are available. Now, China wants that capability. And the reason being is because of the fact that since we're moving into a digital age, I mean, I'm coming to you on a digital device. All of you are watching me on digital devices. We have become so enamored with our digital devices that silicon and silicon chips and circuit boards have become essentially up there with things like oil as far as a world currency product. Okay. So Taiwan being able to do this and do it relatively, inexpensively, etc., and having it show up in just about everything, China wants that. Now, China has not ever really relinquished control, similarly to how they viewed Hong Kong. They have always felt that Taiwan has actually been Chinese territory. And they've talked about this, for multiple years. I mean, it's been decades that they keep saying, they talk about one China, one China. And so what they're doing is they're essentially starting to talk about reunification with Taiwan. They have never recognized Taiwan as a separate country. And same thing like with Hong Kong. They never recognized it as a separate city from China. And so the ramifications of China taking over Taiwan is going to impact the entire electronics industry across the board. I guarantee you. Well, I'm not the only one saying that we need to keep an eye on this. And also, I'm not the only one saying that there is a good chance that China, based on Taiwan and Taiwan's taking over Taiwan, or starting a conflict with Taiwan, that we will have to step in and get into a military engagement, we'll call it, with China. And it caused a little bit of an uproar, to be honest with you. It was an Air Force general who in a memo to his troops pointed out that a memo that the U.S. is on a collision course with communist China. It was four-star Air Force General Mike Minihan said in a memo last week that he believes the U.S. will be in an all-out war with China in the next couple of years. His exact quote is, "I hope I am wrong, but my gut tells me we will fight in 2025, he wrote. Xi secured his third term and set his war council on October 2022. Taiwan's presidential elections are in 2024, and it will offer Xi a reason. The United States also has presidential elections in 2024, and it will offer Xi a distracted America. Xi's team, reason, and opportunity are all aligned to have it in 2025. Okay. Now, as a part of the memo, he was really referencing that he wanted to get his troops prepared for the possibility and, in his mind, the eventuality of war. But the fact of the matter is that it's caused a stir. It really has, and it caused a stir so bad that Mike Pompeo apparently reacted to this. Now, Mike Pompeo was Secretary of State at one point. And yeah, it's one of the things that is kind of interesting about this. And Mike Pompeo addressed the remarks by the general in an appearance on Fox News special report saying, "I take General Minihan to be serious, in the sense that he's clearly very concerned that we're not doing enough to prepare to deter the Chinese Communist Party. I think that's what he's really getting at. It's hard to put timelines on any of these things. He says 2025, but make no mistake about it, Xi Jinping is watching for American weakness. He is watching for the absence of resolve. And if he sees the opportunity, he will seize that very opportunity." Now, here's the thing. Even, the House Foreign Affairs Committee Chairman Michael McCall from Texas, Republican, said Sunday that the odds of a conflict with China by 2025 are very high. Now, if you go back to my episode, I spoke about how China is expanding its reach, and it has been, over the course of the last 10 years, expanding its naval capabilities. In the case of having ships and building ships, well, they're putting a base in the Solomon Islands, and they've also been increasing their reach across the globe for many, many years, in terms of even going to like South America and Africa. I've talked about here in the very recent past how they have worked out resource and mining rights with the Taliban to do it in Afghanistan, because of the fact that we just left the entire base over there. In fact, China has, my understanding from some reports, that China has taken over that base. So, again, a lot of people are focused in Ukraine. But in my particular case, I'm looking at China and I'm saying, look, we are sitting in essentially a perfect storm. We have Ukraine, so that's Eastern Europe, which is kicking off. We have the Middle East, which is starting to get rumblings. I've got something on that here in just a second, as well as, Israel and Iran hyping up their tensions. And then now you have China over on the east or west of the American coast. And all of that combined with the fact that we do have a very compromised president, which I don't know if anybody's tracking Dan Bongino's expose reporting on this for the last week, but if you have not, go to Rumble, look up Dan Bongino, get his, look at his last probably 4 or 5 episodes, starting from today's episode. And he goes through the entire thing, how compromised Joe Biden actually is, in particular with Ukraine. But I actually think that it extends beyond that. He focused a lot on Ukraine. I actually think it's an extension out to China as well, because we know that Hunter Biden had dealings in China with CEFC. I've talked about it on this program before. So here's the thing, is that hopefully we're not going to go into this. We're not going to get into a conflict. But if you look at the global scenarios that we're dealing with, it's going to be to the point where we as the de facto world police are going to be stretched very, very thin should we end up getting involved in any or all of these conflicts. Okay. And so this is really a bit of a problem. Now, one thing I'm going to shift over. Oh yes. Nancy has China connections. There's a lot of China connections within our government as well. Mitch McConnell does, so on and so forth. But I would definitely check out, the whole Dan Bongino thing for sure to just listen to how Joe Biden literally is a foreign agent. I have absolutely no doubts about that at all, based on the evidence that's been presented by Mr. Bongino. Now, we at first, Biden stated that we were not, I'm going to shift over to Ukraine now. We at first did not talk about sending military equipment necessarily. We started off by sending money. Now we're sending tanks. So a big question that has been coming up is shifting to the great F-16 debate, because of course Zelensky is asking for F-16s now. Now, the funny thing about it is we have pretty much stated that we are not going to be sending F-16s. However, I did hear, and I unfortunately do not have the article on this, but I did hear that there is a potential of sending F-16s to Ukraine, but not having them come directly from the U.S. That there is talk of Poland actually sending their F-16s to Ukraine, and then us replenishing Poland as a part of our NATO connection with Poland. So that's going to be kind of interesting to watch and see, is if that happens. But I also saw this article that just popped. Wrong one. Sorry. France is now talking about sending fighter jets to Ukraine. And so this is kind of interesting stuff. And this is based off of 1945's article. And Poland sending fighter jets to Ukraine, France sends fighter jets to Ukraine. And of course, we're going to have to help to backfill whatever those countries have sent because of our NATO treaties and our NATO allies with regards to this. And so, yeah, the rumors that the United States may provide Ukraine with F-16s, even though Joe Biden says, no, we're not going to provide F-16s, he also said no to the tanks. So I don't think that that's going to last very much longer, but seriously, escalations in Ukraine are going to happen, and it's just going to keep getting worse and worse and worse. And yes, Buddy says if they send fighters, Russia will consider USA as a part of the war, I would imagine. Yeah. So there's going to be this is doing nothing, honestly, but escalating the particulars over in Ukraine. But we also, again, back at the Middle East, just to kind of slide a little bit around the globe, but we also have this article that came up, which I showed you. Turkey apparently has pushed into Iraq. And this was published, what's today? Yesterday on, essentially dealing with a small deserted village of in northern Iraq. And there are apparently Turkish military outposts that are setting in Iraq territory. So this kind of scares me a little bit as well, because now We have Iraq. We have Israel's push and dealing with Iran, which they've been dealing with them for years. But the recent reported drone strike that was, assigned blame to the Israelis. Now you have Turkey pushing into Iraq. I mean, our world threat levels are starting to really seriously heat up. And this is something that we need to be very, very careful on. And actually, Craig Hopkins over on Facebook says this government really knows how to bring us to our knees, gives the Middle East $85 billion worth of equipment. That was to Afghanistan, which has since gone to Iran and China and other places. Let the war start. Depleted our oil reserves, which he did. The SPR is down and is now depleting our own military equipment. You are correct because of the fact that we have been, and I showed you this article in one of my last episodes, that we are likely going to be low in our stockpiles because of all the stuff that we've been sending off to Ukraine. We are in a very precarious position. Joe Biden has no real foreign policy. He never has. He's always been a bit of a problem. And as Obama has said, and 3 Chevy just made sure that we knew, never underestimate Joe's ability to F things up. Joe has been wrong on foreign policy multiple times in the past, both as a senator as well as VP, and that's been well documented. So honestly, right now, I would not be surprised if something does pop between now and the end of his term. Okay. Realistically, I just don't. And it's an unfortunate thing. And I know I'm trying to be positive, but to be a realist, I just don't see us not getting into some sort of a conflict in one of those theaters, if not all three, in the near future. Okay. Now, moving back home to some local matters. Obviously, we have our debt ceiling limit looming. And it's been talk in the Twitterverse. It's been talk in the news. Everybody knows that the debt ceiling is coming, that we've already hit it, so on and so forth. And there's been talk about defaulting and the communication between the House Republicans in terms of Speaker McCarthy and the White House. The White House has been saying that he won't negotiate with it, so on and so forth. And so realistically, I mean, we're just in what I would consider a pretty perfect storm here when it comes to some of these things. But one of the things that I'm kind of glad of is the fact that the GOP, and especially some GOP senators, 24 of them to be exact, are talking to Biden or warning him or sending him messages that are basically saying, hey, we're not going to back a debt limit hike without cutting back some spending and doing some fiscal reforms. Because in case you haven't noticed, we are way out of bounds with our national debt. Way out of bounds. To the point where our grandkids are probably going to be paying off our national debt if we could ever get it under control in terms of the spending. But check out this piece from the Epoch Times, and it basically says 24 GOP senators warned Biden that they won't back the debt limit hike without spending cuts and fiscal reforms. Now, the thing about this is, and this is what they sent, and it's a $31 trillion debt is what we're at right now. And basically, here's the statement that they said. They said, we, the undersigned members of the Senate Republican Conference, right to express our outright opposition to a debt ceiling hike without real structural spending reform that reduces deficit spending and brings fiscal sanity back to Washington. The letter was led by Senator Mike Lee, who's a Republican out of Utah, and co-signed by 23 other GOP, including Senator Blackburn, Johnson, Mike Braun, Ted Budd, Ted Cruz, Rick Scott, Rand Paul, Mike Crapo out of Idaho, interesting name, James Risch out of Idaho, John Brasso from Wyoming, and James Lankford out of Oklahoma. The group continued and said, it is the policy of the Senate Republican Conference that any increase in the debt ceiling must be accompanied by cuts in federal spending of an equal or greater amount to as the debt ceiling increase, or meaningful structural reform in spending. The group wrote, we intend to stand by that policy. We'll see how that happens, honestly, to be real. But I'm just going to tell you, so here's some of the reforms that they are suggesting. They pointed to the Prevent Government Shutdowns Act and the Full Faith and Credit Act. The Prevent Government Shutdowns Act, initially introduced by Lankford and Senator Maggie Hassan in New Hampshire in February 2019, would prevent government shutdowns by setting up an automatic continuing resolution and preventing lawmakers from leaving the nation's capital until spending legislation is passed. And the Full Faith and Credit Act was introduced in September of 2021 by a group of GOP senators that, if enacted, would make sure that federal government prioritizes funding for the military, veterans, and seniors should the federal debt ceiling be reached. Now, I want you to notice what I said there. The Full Faith and Credit Act is to make sure that federal government prioritizes funding for military, veterans, and seniors. Seniors. And the reason why I'm emphasizing seniors, to be honest with you, is moving into my next piece. You got to remember that. And that is House Democrat caucus leaders say that Republican plans include changing Social Security. Okay, so first of all, this has been a long-standing argument by the Dems that the Republicans are looking to tear apart Social Security. And I know, folks, I know my audience leans heavily toward the older generation. So I wasn't really sure I wanted to cover this, but it's very important, and I put it in the program tonight just because of this, okay? The Republicans do not want to cut Social Security, okay? They just don't. Regardless of what the Democrat people tell you, the Republicans don't want to cut the benefits and the programs for seniors, okay? For people who have paid into the program. Now, where that is divested, of course, is the point that they are emphasizing here that it was a promise when it was put together. It was a promise for everybody who paid into the program. The problem has been that government, or the Congress in particular, and I had an exception on Twitter about this. I had a little bit of a spat with some individual about this, but the Republicans don't want to take away seniors' money. Okay, they don't want to take away that money. That money is supposed to be and is by law allocated specifically for seniors. Okay, that wasn't supposed to be touched, but Congress over the many, many, many years, and I don't know the record on this, but I can tell you that there are certain Democrats who have consistently fought against changing some of the rules when it comes to Social Security in an effort to try and save Social Security from its ultimate demise, which according to the CBO, where did it go? According to the CBO, and I'm sorry, I've lost the article. I must have inadvertently closed it. But the CBO put out an article, and I have the link in the show notes, by the way. But the CBO put out in a report saying that Social Security itself will become insolvent by 2035. Now, this graph, and I can see that it's not. Let me see if I can blow it up a little bit here for you guys. All right. So this graph is essentially showing you, and this comes from the CBO report. So if you look at this graph, they have projected revenues and outlays, and then with scheduled benefits, and then outlays with payable benefits. So the blue line is the outlays with scheduled benefits. The green line is the revenues that are coming in, and the black dashes are outlays with payable benefits. Now, you'd have to read the report in order to understand the differences. But the point here is that as you look here, you can see projected revenues are dropping off and staying relatively stagnant, okay? But projected outlays based off of current scheduled benefits is going to be increasing over time. And so what you can see by the black dashed line is that right around 2035, they all of a sudden get dropped off. Now, I want to tell you right now, okay? Seriously, regardless of what the Dems tell you, Social Security is not going to go away. All right. It's just not. There are protections in place to keep Social Security around. The challenge here, though, is whether or not the benefits will stay the same over time. Now, by the word insolvent, they basically mean that the protection or the savings is going to be gone. There will still be revenues coming in, but unfortunately, the projected revenues coming in are not going to be sufficient in order to handle the outlays or the outcosts. That is considered deficit. Now, there is absolutely no doubt in anyone's mind that we have a huge problem when it comes to things like Social Security. The Congress has been picking away at it, has been taking money out of it, so on and so forth, using it for different things, running it around, et cetera, et cetera. And so, honestly, it needs a bunch of reform. We need to reform what we're spending our money on in terms of the government and how the money is spent. This is not something that is negotiable, just like the Democrats have talked about, where you have the military, the veterans, and the seniors. They all get put into the same lump. So don't listen to the Democrat rhetoric that the Republicans want to eliminate Social Security. It is just flat out not true, okay? It is just flat out not true, period. And so, don't listen to them. I'm just saying right now, just don't listen to them. Read the fine print, read what the Republicans are doing, and just do that. Okay, so let me see. All right. Okay, enough about finances necessarily, but now let's talk about our wonderful pandemic that we have going on. You know what? Before I get into that, I just noticed I have been talking quite a lot. This is coming in late. Let me go ahead and do I got to find the special. There we go. Let me go ahead and do.
Please check your mailbox. A new message has arrived.
And tonight's pet of the week comes from over on Facebook, Dave V. I'm not going to put his full name in there, but Dave V gave me this submission. Give me just a second. Let me get rid of this. Okay. This is Sadie. And Sadie is 12 years old. Sadie apparently is a boxer German Shepherd mix. I don't know if I necessarily would have guessed that out of just looking at Sadie, but there you go. And apparently has been or is a rescue that Dave's coworker could not keep where he was moving to. So his coworker was leaving and they couldn't keep Sadie because of where they were going. And so Dave helped out and said, hey, I'm going to take her. Okay. Now, what does Sadie do? Sadie, let me just tell you, Sadie has a wonderful time during the day because apparently Sadie is very, very social because she always enjoys visiting with her extended family. For an example, the neighbors and even the mail lady. So Sadie doesn't fall into the stereotype of dogs hating the mail lady. So Sadie is, that's what she does. She does during her wonderful days. She kind of hangs out. As you can see, she's got a really comfy bed that she's laying in a corner of the room. And so that is Sadie's story. The 12-year-old boxer German Shepherd mix. And I want to thank Dave V for putting in and submitting Sadie into the pet of the week. Do me a favor, if you would, please. I do the pet of the week every Wednesday. So do me a favor, send me your pet photos and a description about them. Name, obviously, breed, if known, any kind of little story that goes along with it. You can send that into fans. That is FANS, Frank Alpha November Sierra, Foxtrot Alpha November Sierra, at whiskeymusings.online. That's fans at whiskeymusings.online. And you can submit that for Pet of the Week. I put them in a queue and I try to take them as they come in, first in, first out, kind of a queue. And that email is also for my Saturday nights questions for whiskey, which, by the way, I am empty right now. So if you have a question for whiskey or a burning question in your mind that you think it would be absolutely fantastic for me to research and answer for you, then please submit those also to fans at whiskeymusings.online. And like I said, I thank Dave V for sharing Sadie with us. That is absolutely wonderful. All right. So the wonderful House of Representatives passed a bill today. And of course, as we all know, because the Senate is not in our control, and especially because we don't have a veto-proof majority in both houses, it's probably not going to go anywhere. It's nothing more than symbolic at best. However, it is pretty awesome to see that they're at least trying to stand up to the establishment. And what am I talking about? Well, I am talking about the House passed a bill ending COVID-19 emergencies, the healthcare worker vaccine mandate. So those were the two bills that went through the House and got voted on, and of course went on. Now, the thing about COVID-19 and the COVID-19 emergency is the fact that Biden also, in preparation for these bills to be passed, Biden also mentioned that the COVID-19 emergency will end on May 11th. Why did he pick May 11th? I have no idea. But that was what the White House announced. However, in true Biden style, Biden gets in front of reporters and apparently doesn't do well off script. So apparently Biden came out from the White House and he walked up and I don't know if you can kind of see in the photograph, but what you don't see is, which you would if you watch the video, clip of it that C-SPAN has in the link to the article. If you look at that video, you can see he walks up and he literally grabs the reporter's hand who's holding the umbrella. And so he grabs it and he holds onto it during the time that he's answering the question. I don't understand why he did that. I mean, that's just I think that's just Creepy Joe being Creepy Joe, to be honest with you. But he was apparently asked about that decision and about ending the COVID emergency on May 11th. And the reporter asks literally, what is behind your decision to end the COVID emergency? Now, before I go into the answer, I'm just going to point out to you, Democrats love the COVID emergency. Okay. They love the COVID emergency because it allows them special things, which they're not supposed to have, by the way, because there is no definition of emergency in the Constitution. There is no definition. And if you have this book and you read through the Constitution, you'll look, they don't say anything in this document that basically says that government needs to stop in an emergency, that government needs to have special, certain people have special powers, so on and so forth. None of that is supposed to be in place. However, they apparently do because they often go off script on constitutional matters. But anyway, the point that I'm making here is that he decided to end the COVID emergency, which means that some of this stuff is going to, some of their special powers and stuff is going to get rescinded. But his answer was kind of odd. Because he answered the question, which again, just to remind people what you're behind your decision to end the COVID emergency, his answer was that the COVID emergency will end when the Supreme Court ends it. Now, what in the heck does that mean? Because an emergency would be defined by either the executive branch or Congress, ideally. What does the Supreme Court have to do with that? Other than he's basically saying that the Supreme Court will force him to end it, that he will get forced into ending it. That's the only explanation that I can think of, is that he's basically admitting that he won't end it until somebody forces him to end it. In which case, that's going to be a real problem. But another report that came out, and again, I don't know. Look, folks, if you really, really, really want to understand what's going on with the whole COVID, the vaccines, etc., the Epoch Times has been putting together a massive amount of articles with all of their information with regards to COVID, the vaccines, the injuries, etc. If you get a chance, go over and read them. And dig into them, because they've got a whole slew of exposés on all of this stuff. But as a part of that, I'm sorry, not but as a part of that, Pfizer apparently has been raking in billions on the COVID vaccine sales. And it's the highest revenue in company's history. So seriously, I mean, so keep in mind too, that remember, Pfizer and Moderna both have had very spotty records when it comes to submitting vaccines to the FDA. They've been fined multiple times. There's been safety problems. Many of their submissions have never come to market. So why we all of a sudden fell into the idea that Pfizer and Moderna are the only ones that could make a COVID-19 vaccine, it just seems a little suspect to me. Just really, really odd. But apparently all of those free vaccines, somebody's been paying for them, because Pfizer now has, rakes in billions, and now has a report that basically says that they are making billions off of this stuff. Okay. Now I'm going to pull back for just a second. I want to check and see something here. Oh, okay. So the next article that I have is from Just the News. Do you remember all that time where they were saying you've got to max, or you've got to mask up? If you don't mask up, mask or vax, I think is what Fauci was saying, mask or vax. And I know some people even now that are, masking with either 1, 2, or 3 currently. Well, apparently, and Just the News reported this has come out on multiple outlets. I just grabbed the Just the News, but apparently there is a massive mask meta study that has essentially stated, and Dan Bongino talked about this. I'm a little disappointed because I wanted to pop the the answer here. But apparently there was a massive study that was done that even the N95 masks, and definitely not the surgical masks that everybody has been wearing, or even the cloth masks that everybody has been wearing, or hey, even those plexiglass masks that everybody's been wearing. None of them. In this massive study, it undermines the whole idea of the COVID mask mandates. It's basically saying that there's little to no difference in exposure with any of those masks, any of them. So folks, take your masks off. Seriously, take your masks off. You know, you either had COVID, you're either vaxxed for COVID, or you may possibly even be immune to COVID too. Apparently there was an article, I haven't pulled it up, but there was an article in the Epic Times that talked about why some people just don't get COVID. And so there is a possibility that some people already have natural immunity to the thing. But that being said, masks, they don't work. They never have been over respiratory viruses. This has been mentioned multiple times over and over and over again. So the whole thing about the science, and it's, you know, this is scientific evidence, all of that is thrown out the door. Okay? All thrown out the door. All right? Flat out. It just is. Okay? Okay. So in terms of public health, and I'm probably going to have to end on this one, although I really would like to. Oh, I've got one other thing that I definitely have to get to, but this is probably going to be the last article that I cover on this subject. So, you know, Biden is so big into this whole thing about medical emergencies and things like that. Okay. Well, apparently a report came out, and Daily Wire reports it, that the Biden admin is apparently evaluating declaring a public health emergency on abortion. These guys, seriously, I mean, oh my gosh. Anyway, I don't understand this. I really don't. They've already been slapped by the Supreme Court, basically saying that with the whole, you know, Roe v. Wade overturn, that, and I've even said it on this program, abortion does not show up in the Constitution. It's not part of the federal government's purview. It was specifically, under the 10th Amendment, one of my favorite amendments, and never should have been a federalized law, period. But why are we doing a public health emergency? There is no public health emergency when it comes to abortion. If you live in Washington, you can still get it. If you live in California, you can still get one. Even California actually has passed laws to make it to where they don't care. Everybody coming from anywhere can get an abortion if they want. This is not a public health emergency. I'm sorry, it just isn't. It's just not. So apparently this was reported originally by Axios, and they cited the Health and Human Services Secretary Xavier Becerra, and he said there are discussions on a wide range of measures that we can take to try to protect people's rights. Again, abortion is not a right. It never was. Okay, folks, it never was. Yeah. Roe versus Wade was the Supreme Court doing an activist thing and overstretching its bounds. Period. End of story. It always should have been at the state level. It always should have been a state and a people issue. And I hazard a guess that even if something were to get passed at the national level, that it would get challenged again with the idea. I would hope that they would use the 10th Amendment in particular, but with the idea that it would eventually go to the Supreme Court as well, with this whole thing. So I don't know what the heck they're talking about, but obviously, you know, abortion, that is what the Dems have always run on, and so on and so forth. I just don't understand the logic and thought process behind this, but then again, Dems don't do logic. All right. The last article that I want to bring up, and this one's really a funny one. I'm going to leave you on a funny note. Okay. Remember how I was telling you how Mike Wallace did the interview with Morgan Freeman in the beginning? Okay. Well, apparently Chris Wallace does not have the same star power that his dad, Mike, had. This popped from the Daily Fetched. And apparently Chris Wallace's ratings are so bad that even amateur YouTubers are getting more views. So let's see here. So, obviously CNN has had just their worst ratings month this last time. But apparently Chris Wallace doesn't draw in the viewers. In January, his show averaged an embarrassing 365,000 viewers. And according to this piece, it gets worse. Out of those viewers, just 48,000 of them were in the highly coveted 25 to 50-year-old demographic, according to Nielsen ratings, Nielsen's data. Okay. His show last Sunday averaged just 323,000 viewers and 38,000 in the 25 to 34 demographic. I don't even know why CNN is even alive right now, to be honest with you. They just need to go away. But realistically, I do want to talk about this because, and this kind of brings this around. I've been pushing a campaign for this show, and I really would appreciate your guys' help, my regular viewers and everything. I'm looking to get 10,000 subscribers on Rumble by the end of 2023. If you have not subscribed to my show, do me a favor, go on over to Rumble. And I know I stream to Facebook, I stream to YouTube. I'm going to stay on those platforms for as long as I can, okay? But I definitely would appreciate if you would go over to Rumble, set up an account. It's free. And do me a favor, find the Whiskey Musings Broadcast. It should be the only one that pops in. But find the Whiskey Musings Broadcast and subscribe. I would really appreciate it. If you like my content, if you like what I do, I would really appreciate the support. And so that pretty much is my final Whiskey Musings thought of the night. But before I go, I hate this. Music Man over on Rumble has a birthday today. So guess what? Here you go, Music Man. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Music Man. Happy birthday to you. Okay, now I did that for one of my other subscribers. I'm not going to do it for everybody, but maybe I will. I don't know. All right. You all have a great evening. Have a wonderful night. And we'll see you next time, Saturday, on the Whiskey Musings Broadcast. Good night, everybody.